Hi, welcome back to Anna and Peyton's online psych school. In this video, I'll be talking about how conditioned responses are acquired and the contributions of Ivan Pavlov. So a conditioned response is learned by pairing a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus, and Pavlov actually began to study the activity of the higher parts of the body by psychological methods, mainly through the use of his conditioned reflexes. And so with that, he created the Pavlov theory, which is a learning procedure that involves pairing a stimulus with a conditioned response. And so one of his experiments actually began with demonstrating how the presence of a bowl of dog food, which would be the stimulus, how it could trigger an unconditioned response, which would be salivation. And so he actually inserted a small test tube into the cheek of each dog to measure the saliva when the dogs were fed. And going off that, I actually have a video that kind of goes more into depth about the experiment, and it also shows how the tubes were placed on the dogs.
As this original footage shows, Pavlov was initially interested in digestion and the action of the salivary glands. By diverting the saliva of dogs into test tubes, he could precisely measure if and how much they salivated during digestion.
And so the dogs were actually fed this powder made from meat instead of actual meat. He noticed that the dogs started to associate like his lab assistant him with the food, creating a learned and conditioned response. With the experiment, he predicted the dogs would salivate in response to the food placed in front of them, but he even noticed that the dogs would actually begin to salivate whenever they even heard the footsteps of his assistant. What he discovered that any object or event that the dogs learned to associate with food, such as like the lab assistant, would trigger the same response, and he realized that he actually made an important scientific discovery that conditioned responses can be made from that. Pavlov's theory later developed into classical conditioning, and it resulted in Pavlov getting the Nobel Prize for Psychology. Thanks for listening to Anna and Peyton's online psych school.